nice sounds for relaxing. And we'll learn a little bit about these marvelous kites of the early days of flying, and a bit about the men who flew them. Let's start with this one. So you can see that it is a biplane. It has some rockets attached between the planes and a gun mounted on the top wing. It is a single-seater, painted red, and you can see the cockade, the round circles are blue, white, red, which means that it is French, and there are the colors and a number on the tail, and there is the tail skid there. These airplanes come from a game that first was called Wings of War and later renamed Wings of Glory. It's loads of fun to play if you like maneuvering these early aircraft. It can be very interesting to see how they could maneuver, and you also have these altitude pegs, which I'm going to try to pull out. So you can put your airplane at different altitudes depending on how many of these little Lego type pegs you want to stack, and engage in a pretend dogfight. This particular airplane, Nieuport 16, and the squadron is number 67 in the French Air Force, the XIII. The pilot of this plane was Jean Navarre, and he was sous-lieutenant. And there is his pilot card. It says where he was born in 1895 and where he died in 1919 in France. And he had 12 victories in this aircraft. It's very pretty colors. So there's our Nieuport. The next one we're going to look at. Can you guess what nationality it is by the cockade? I'm going to try to pull it out. It might be a bit noisy. So we have the colors red, white, and green. Yes, you guessed it, it's Italian. Beautiful colors too. On the underside, we have red and green. Actually, on the port and starboard side as well. It's a very nice yellow plane with very wide wingspan, a black tail skid, and the Italian colors on the rudder. single-seater, and it has 2 forward-mounted machine guns. It's a very pretty plane. It's got the number 76. Let's see if we can read about it. There we are. Unreal HD1. And this is from the Squadron 76A. Squadriglia, an Italian squadron. And it looks like Silvio Scaloni was the pilot. Scaroni. And I don't think we have a pilot card. These are all of the maneuver cards. So all we have for this pilot is that his name was Silvio Scaroni. It's a very pretty Italian plane. The kind probably that Porco flew before he became a pig. Now let's look at another one. This one should look familiar. I'm going to try and get it out without any noise, but that's going to be impossible. There we go. This one, the propeller turns and the wheels turn. And you can see it's painted a sort of a beige color on the underside, and on the top an olive green or drab. And you can see the cockade is red, white, blue, and that means it is British. And for contrast, here's the French cockade, blue, red, white. So you can see the difference between those planes. Not only are they different kind of plane, but they're a different nationality. You can see that the French Nieuport has a bit very slightly swept wings, whereas this British one is straight. We have again 2 forward-mounted machine guns for the single seat of the pilot. It's very detailed, very nicely painted. So you can see how the wooden frame had the canvas stretched across it very tight, and then it was painted with something called dope that made the canvas very hard, and it made a very nice flying surface, so you had smooth leading edge on each wing plane. And this one, as you can see in the design from the front, was maneuvered by bending the plane surfaces or the wing surface. They would warp them, the cables that were connected to your controls would warp the wing surfaces and allow you to maneuver that way. If you wanted to turn, you would use the rudder going this way. And of course the elevators were the flaps on the surfaces warping would help you bank. Your rudder was for yaw, and elevator for pitch. Let's read about this one. There you are, you guessed it, the Sopwith Camel from 66 Squadron. And this one has a very famous pilot named George Barker. Very famous flying ace. So Major William George Barker of the Royal Flying Corps, 66 Squadron. Incidentally, the first military to have a dedicated air force was Australia. The Australian Air Force was initiated during the Great War. Airplanes were very new, and most countries' militaries included them in their armed forces. They were part of the cavalry. And there's our Sopwith Camel. An engineering milestone in its day. Well, how do we follow a Sopwith Camel? With a Fokker, of course. Now, Anthony Fokker was a Dutch aeronautical engineer with some very innovative designs, and this is one of his best. I think we have a card here. There we are. Our Fokker DR1. A triplane, the very famous triplane of the Red Baron, or Manfred von Richthofen. You can see, very nice model. The wheels turn, the propeller turns. We even got some engine detail there under the cowling. So these are all, so far, rotary engines that we've looked at, which means as the propeller turns, it fires each of the pistons. Poof, 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 and that's why they made that sound. This one had a great amount of lift because it had not only 3 wings or plane surfaces, but also the one here between the landing wheels and the tail skid there. And you can see the dove-shaped tail as well. This one actually had ailerons on the top plane so that it could be controlled. The story about the German squadrons painting their planes all kinds of colors started with Manfred himself, the Red Baron. He became so confident, and he was such a good flying ace, a good pilot, pursuit pilot, that he said, I could paint my plane red, or perhaps someone suggested it. So the story goes that if he painted his plane red to make it easier for the enemy to see him, he still couldn't be shot down, and so he did. I think the story was that it was a challenge. It was issued as a challenge. Go ahead and paint your plane red. Something along those lines. And he did. Eventually, however, he was shot down by ground troops from Australia, and it's largely believed his last flight, he was killed by a shot from the ground by a Sergeant Popkin of the Australian line. It went through his chest and out the front. He was wearing a flight jacket over his silk pajamas, and he was chasing a British plane. And as the plane came down, all of the Australian ground troops came and cut pieces off the canvas for souvenirs, because he was such a legendary pilot by that time. And as I explained, this plane has quite a lot of lift because of its three plane surfaces, the three wings. It could pretty much turn in place because it was suspended in the air like a kite. So he could turn to see who was behind him. And there is the card for this aircraft, XIII, or Jagdstaffel, Squadron 11, Manfred von Richthofen. Luftstreitkräfte, XIII. Let's look at another German plane. I always thought the Germans had the coolest stuff. In both the First World War and the Second World War. Now this one is part of what the British called the German Flying Circus. They called them that because of all of the crazy colors they were painted. This one, you can see, does not have ailerons. Again, it's a warp wing. Nice little motion on the propeller and wheels for the model. Forward-mounted machine gun, and we have a pilot and observer seat with a gun as well, a rear-mounted gun. The Germans and later the British had a way of making sure the machine gun didn't fire into the propeller or on the blades, and this was accomplished by way of a chain that prevented the gun from firing when the propeller was in front of it, so it worked similar to a bicycle chain. You can also see the sleek cowling forward. This is not a rotary engine, but it would have been an inline combustion engine. And a little mouth and eye painted on this with some very beautiful little patterns there. The sky blue. This is a really pretty one of my favorites, the Roland C.II. Feldflieger Abteilung 5B. So not necessarily a pursuit plane, but that would depend on who was chasing you. And our pilot here is Lieutenant Richard Seibert, and the observer was Hauptmann Arthur Pfleger. A very pretty plane. Let's have another Allied plane. Can you guess what country this one is from? Remember, the Allies in the First World War were Italy, Britain, France, and later the United States. So here we have our cockades. Italian red, white, green, and this one white, blue, red. This is a special case, and I will show you as soon as I can get the plane out of the packaging. Okay, and I think the giveaway will be the wheels. Can you see the star on the wheel? Just there. So we have the sort of neutral drab on the bottom and camouflage on the top. Number 1. And another special little symbol there, a top hat with stars and stripes representing Uncle Sam. So yes, this is a plane flown by an American, Eddie Rickenbacker. This is a SPAD 13 in the United States Air Service 94th Era Squadron, and the pilot was Captain Edward Vernon Rickenbacker. Again, it's a rotary engine, 2 forward-mounted machine guns, a single seat, and we have ailerons slightly there, a spread tail. Later on, the cockades would have stars on them, and before the United States entered the war, there was of course the Escadrille Lafayette, which was made up of American airmen eager to fly these new airplanes. They joined the French Air Force, and that was an American design, the SPAD 13. Let's have another German plane. This is another one from the Flying Circus, and what I think is a super cool aircraft. Really big in scale compared to its companions. We have a sight and a huge machine gun forward mounted. You can see them there. Honeycomb rainbow colors on the wings, stripes on the tail, and of course the German cross. Single-seater, very low riding, tail on the ground. See that? The angle is very steep when on the ground. And it's got an appropriate name, the Albatros D.Va. And this is from Jagdstaffel or Squadron 37. Very famous pilot, Ernst Udet. There was a really great German film made about Ernst Udet and the German Luftwaffe. Of course, a lot of these aces that survived became instrumental in forming squadrons and aircraft for the Second World War and before. Ernst Udet was portrayed in the film by a wonderful German actor, very handsome Kurt Jürgens. And Udet was unhappy, as many German generals had become with Hitler's policy. And in the film, I think he committed suicide by crashing his plane. Sad story, but it is a very, very cool plane here. The Albatros, flown by Ansaldo. I have one last German plane, and this one is a rotary engine. Do you think it looks familiar? This one is particularly weird because it is a Sopwith Camel. There's our rotary engine, blue cowling, German cross, no other markings. Let's learn about this special case. This was a captured Sopwith Camel by Oberleutnant Otto Kissenbert from Jagdstaffel 23. It's a very odd bird indeed. Pun intended. That's all of the aircraft that I have. Of this size or scale from the Great War. I hope you've enjoyed looking at these planes with me. And listening to the sounds of the boxes. There's a bit of plastic in there. And listening to the stories about the pilots. So wherever you are, I hope you float off into the clouds. Very relaxed, being good to yourself.